special edition of COS Live. We are streaming for you a live committee hearing of the Wyoming Senate Committee on Corporations, Elections, and Political Subdivisions. I'm Rita Peters. I'm the Senior Vice President for Legislative Affairs with Convention of States Action. And this committee hearing is a continuation of a hearing that we live streamed for you in another special edition on Tuesday of this week. It's a hearing on Wyoming's Senate Joint Resolution 11, which is our Convention of States application in the state of Wyoming. The committee hearing on Tuesday didn't quite get to finish testimony on our resolution. They ran out of time, so they continued that hearing until this morning. And my understanding is that mainly the committee chair just wants to give Convention of States President and co-founder Mark Meckler a chance to respond to some pretty outrageous and inflammatory allegations that opponents of our resolution, opponents of Convention of States in general, and I dare say of Article 5 of the Constitution, made against our organization. Basically, opponents claimed that the real goal of Convention of States action is to tear up our Constitution and replace it with a brand new one. Well, folks, that's just crazy talk. And the chair was so incensed by these comments that he told COS President Mark Meckler, who was testifying live on Tuesday, that he wanted him to be here this morning for the continuation of this hearing so that Mark could respond directly to the crazy allegations made against Mark and against our entire organization. So it should be interesting. Mark is standing by right now on Zoom because this morning, Mark is actually in Boise, Idaho for some other scheduled meetings with legislators and a radio show and a town hall event. He's got a really busy day, but Mark is up bright and early to be part of this hearing virtually via Zoom and respond to the allegations that were made. If you're new to Convention of States, our application is all about a convention for proposing amendments to the U.S. Constitution on 3 topics: imposing fiscal restraints on the federal government, limiting the power and jurisdiction of the federal government, and setting term limits for federal officials. If our resolution is successful in the Wyoming legislature this year, Wyoming would join the other 19 states that have already applied for a convention to propose amendments on these 3 topics. So that's what we're all about today. Our resolution, again, you will hear it referred to as Senate Joint Resolution 11 or SJ 11. It's sponsored by Senator Dan Larson in Wyoming. And there is one bill ahead of us on this committee's agenda this morning. So I believe that's what they're talking about right now. But stay tuned, and we are going to go ahead and live stream this committee hearing. So you should be seeing Mark Meckler up in just a few minutes, and then we may even be able to get Mark Meckler or Senior Regional Director Dave Schneider on for quick recap and commentary after the hearing on Wyoming SJ 11. Let's go to that committee room right now.
Limited that candidate filing date to 45 days before. And I think that I've actually heard the clerk say that if we could change that date to about the absentee ballots go out, that fits with their schedule. And it also allows to know who's filing, who is running for office before they decide which primary ballot they want to vote on. So although I think the current statute is fine the way it is, I do think shortening that window and allowing folks the opportunity to have all the information before they make a choice is the best to go.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Anybody else? Thank you, Ms. Lowe.
Great, thank you, and thank you for your service.
You bet. Let's hear from the clerks. Sorry, I can't remember who testified last time and who didn't, but please go ahead, Ms. Langford.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. I'm Mary Langford, and I have the honor of representing the county clerks in the state of Wyoming, and I couldn't remember who testified last time either. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm here for the purpose today to focus on administration of Wyoming elections, and particularly change in party affiliation. The county clerks have no position on this bill, but we have concerns. The education of the voters, if this bill were to go to effect the way it's presented now with registration, party registration having to be in place before filing, is going to be a big lift education-wise for the voters. We're concerned also about voters being disenfranchised. Nationally, 39% of the voters are either independent or unaffiliated at this point in time. In Wyoming, that's 11% as of January. It was before the general election and the election season we just went through. But those folks will be either an unaffiliated voter, an independent voter, or a minor party voter, and then they will declare a major party to vote. There's some maintenance issues with conduct of the election with voting in July. Some of those kinds of things that will probably crop up that the clerks will need to be able to deal with to take care of the voter registration list as well as to accommodate the voters. And we have another issue that comes up on election day is folks will come in and they'll start voting a ballot and realize that that's not who they want to vote for, and come back and want to spoil that ballot and vote for the other on the other ballot. So those are some of those kind of small maintenance issues that that arise for clerks would be difficult to deal with if this changes. And after watching the other crossover bills that have been in the mill, if you're looking for a different date to have that party change be in place before the filing starts is a spot. 45 days before the election is another spot. Any time that would fall if it were to say, oh, we're gonna cut it off the 1st of June or whatever, if that's during the filing period, you don't want that to be the case. Or registration during filing, you can imagine what a mess that would create. But and whatever the policy decision is on this, the clerks are able to administer this bill. There'll probably be a few kinks, but as I said, our biggest concern is just the voter education, as this is a pretty significant change to the way we've done business for a really long time. And Mr. Chairman, committee, I'm happy to stand for any questions.
Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, we ordinarily think of the party changes, Democrat to Republican or vice versa. But am I right in thinking that the biggest volume here is going to be from unaffiliated to a party? And Mr. Chairman, the reason I ask is I think if they can't do that, a number of my constituents are going to be pretty deeply offended because they'll be locked out of voting in the primary. And I think that's particularly true. I've got a part of my district where there's a relatively high turnover because a lot of them are in the oil business and move around, and they often register unaffiliated and then declare a party. Do we have any? Am I right in thinking that that's a party change from unaffiliated to a party? And do we have any statistics on how prevalent that is?
Ms. Langford.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Scott, you're correct. With the numbers that I've got, as of January 1st, a month ago, in Wyoming, there were nearly 32,000 unaffiliated voters. The Democratic Party at that point in time had 36,000 registered voters. So that 11% of the voting population is looking for a home when it goes to a primary election if they choose to vote in a major primary election. And we do see that movement and have seen that movement. Statement that people in Wyoming vote for people, that's pretty true. And that's what you're talking, Scott.
Anybody else? Anybody else on the committee? I might have a couple. So looking at the meat of the bill is on page 3. It's section A at the top of the page. For a primary election, an elector may declare or change party affiliation by completing an application prior to the non-day. So you have someone that moves into Wyoming and they move in past the nomination day. According to this, would be an elector, and they would not be able to declare. In essence, we wouldn't be allowing them to vote. I mean, doesn't the plain language of this mean that? So if you're a brand new resident of Wyoming, you go to the clerk. I think this language says you have to have done it prior to the first day. And you see what I'm saying? And I think the same thing for an independent. I think an independent doesn't declare that they're an independent. And so this is the first declaration. And we're saying you can't make that first declaration as a new citizen or maybe someone who hasn't voted before. Ms. Langford, am I reading that right?
Chairman, I tend to agree with you on that. I hadn't really read it that close before, but I believe that there would be a challenge there, whether you would be able to register and vote and declare as a new person to the state, maybe a new person to a county.
And I guarantee in a federal election,
Would be.
it'd be hot boots on top of you. So I think the clerks might want to rethink their position about this bill as it's written, because that seems problematic to me. And
Yeah.
I know the position is neutral. I'm thinking you ought to think about that. Anybody else? Thank you, Ms. Langford. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I like the looking back and forth of everybody back here. Ms. Johnson, come on up. Yeah, that's great, Mayor.
We'll do this in round robin. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I hope you can hear me okay. My name is Tammy Johnson, and I'm here today for you as a citizen of Wyoming and a voter in Wyoming. I wanted to just be clear, I don't have any angst or political angst against Senator Beitman. We are good friends and we have great political debate. And so my comments today are in no way a disparage of him as a legislator. But I want to share with you something. I am a crossover voter. After hearing the comments made in the last meeting by the sponsor of this bill and the Secretary of State, I have to tell you, I take great exception to those comments. I wanted to give you a profile of a crossover voter and explore some options that I would have if this bill passes. I am not a, quote, high-fiving, backslabbing, disingenuous voter intent on disrupting the platform of the Republican Party. I would like to think my vote has that kind of power, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't. And I cannot take credit for something that others have done before me. So I am, however, an informed, engaged, and strategic voter. I think about the value of my vote, and I do my best to use it to contribute to a government that will be representative of all the people of Wyoming. So when I vote and when I cross over to vote, I consider the candidates very carefully. I look at what they represent, not I look at who they are, not what they represent. I do not vote for what is on the ballot. I vote for who is on the ballot. Who are the candidates, their beliefs, their positions on issues, how they will take care of my fellow man, and how they will create a government that meets my expectations. Being in a party where there is almost always only one primary candidate and only one that rarely wins, those do not allow me to engage in this kind of political debate with myself when I choose who I vote for. So I don't think that this bill allows voters to engage fully in the process. As I lie in bed last night at 2 a.m. thinking about my comments on this, because this means to me, couldn't sleep, I forced myself to think about another situation that might be parallel, and I thought about gun regulations. And I thought, these two rights are granted to us in the Constitution. And I thought, if this bill were dealing with gun regulation, the people who oppose it would feel that their rights were being taken away. Even though their constitutional right will stand, the Second Amendment still be in place, they would feel that their rights were being chipped away at. And I understand that. And this really made me reflect on that even more and say, yeah, I get that. That must be how they feel. So then I thought, well, this is a constitutional right that I have. And this little bill that just does a little bit to my voting right is chipping away at my right to vote freely. So learned a little bit about myself in that dialogue I had at 2 a.m, but I also learned that that's how important this bill is to me. That this, just as this bill may be to others in this room on gun rights, it is so to me for voting rights. So when I think about this, I think, wow, there's a lot of bills in this legislature, this session, that cover voting rights. Like, there's a lot
of bills in this committee today. So you
I
gotta
will
find an end
close.
to
I
this.
know, I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. So as I think about this, I thought if there were this many bills on gun rights, we would be in a mess here today. And there's not, thankfully. So in closing, Mr. Chairman, I have a lot of things to say, but I think there's two options, maybe three for me if this bill passes. One is I can become a Republican, and I'm pretty sure they don't want me. They don't want the likes of me, and I would probably get kicked out of the party or censured pretty quickly. The other thing that I could do is just stay in my party and not vote in the primary, and that usurps my voice. I don't want to do that, only voting in the primary narrowly. And the third thing that could happen is that we could have an autocracy. And I think you all agree with me, that is no way to run a democracy. I don't want to see a one-party state. So I ask you to not do this bill, not pass this bill, because it has ramifications beyond what seems to be a little blip in the what happens on voting day. So I've cut my comment short for the sake of time, and I appreciate all you've done, and please vote no on this bill.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Questions for Ms. Johnson? Thank you very much. Ms. Simmons, or who wants to go first? You guys are pointing back and forth. Ms. Simmons.
Gail Simmons, Civics 307. And I had sent to you previously a presentation. I'm not going to, because you've got lots of it. I have a proposed, not recommended, but proposed amendment to address some of those problems. I first want to say it is not right to do crossovers, and I do not condone it. However, for all the reasons you just heard, I absolutely do understand it. The underlying premise, the foundation of these bills seem to be that somehow or other the people of Wyoming should care more about a platform, which most have not even read, than they should the candidates. And I'm just going to quickly go through some of the language that we heard a couple of days ago. Malicious intent, coercion, manipulation, political operatives, commitment to party, sanctity, absolute debacle, made a mockery, practice of party raiding, maliciously change outcome, candidates represent the platform. I would say to you that hyperbole may be appropriate on the campaign trail, but it's not a purpose for passing legislation. I would also note that on all the crossover, all 30 of the people who have signed on in one way or other to all these, all won. They all won. So we have the winner saying the election has been changed. And again, I go to facts, not fear. So there's just a couple of facts I want to point out. In 2022, 170,000 voted Republican. I don't care how many registered, 170,000 voted. 12,000 of those had changed over from Dems, 9,000 of whom stayed. So they change over, but they stay. And that's been true in all the years I've looked at past. 7,000 came from unaffiliated, which is the technical term, and 6,000 stayed. So 151,000 Republicans, those that were Republican before the season, or who registered newly or renewed, were Republican. But of those 19,000, 15,000 stayed. So that's 73,000 more than 2020. There were 3,000 crossover, so 70,000 of the increase were voters, were people who were and always were Republican. If all 19,000 crossover voted for the former Congresswoman, then 20,000 came from existing or new Rs. This is not driving the outcomes. Again, if you also look at the undervote, you will see that the undervotes is the lowest it's ever been for US Congress, 0.5%. So all these people who bothered to show up and get a ballot, all of them voted at the top of the ticket. Go down, it comes to 15%, which magically is about the number of people that we saw cross over. I would also point out that it was 4.4% for the governor and 8.4% for the Secretary of State. In fact, the number of people who did not vote, undervotes, was greater than the margin between the first and second candidate in the Republican primary. Just pointing out. For all of the state Senate and state House, it was 15%. Then the question is this really party faithful? And you take a look at voting for precinct, which is what establishes the official party. 458,000 filed votes, 488,000 undervotes. I would present to you that most people who vote don't care about the party. Those of us deeply embedded in it do, but overwhelmingly they do not. So the conclusions are, even if 2022 was way higher, it did not alter the outcome. Voting, including any crossover and regulars and new, are driven by support of candidates, not party platform. As I've told somebody else, the Democrats don't care about the Republican platform. The Republicans don't care about the Republican platform. We just know what we know. If we shut down crossover, it will cause permanent change in affiliation, and we will have a de facto single party state. That, I think, is exactly opposite of what the testimony has been. We want Democrats who believe with Democrats to stay in Democrats. We want Republicans to stay as Republicans, but we're going to take action that does contrary. If we really want to eliminate crossover and exclude non-Republicans or non-Democrats from nomination in a particular party, the only way to do that, nominate in caucus and have qualifying primaries like we do for municipality, an open primary. So my recommendation is,
You're getting close to finishing up?
if you're going to pass out of committee, then I have two identified amendments. The first of which addresses the kind of strange idea that we're going to shut people down from canceling their registration. That's not the perceived issue. It's when they re-register. And so what this does is says, if you cancel during your registration, during that blackout period, when you re-register, you cannot change the existing party affiliation because it locks it in at the time that you cancel. So that kind of gets around some of those others. The second is that if you're really determined to do this, then have it be at the beginning of actual voting. And so whatever on some of the other bills, that might be 28 days if you're not UOCAVA, or 45 days if you are. I would just like the language to say on the first day of absentee voting based on your particular circumstance. And I stand for questions.
Thank you, Ms. Simmons. Any questions for Ms. Simmons? Senator Scott?
You said 19,000 did cross over, change of affiliation. How many of those came unaffiliated?
Ms. Simmons?
Through you, Chairman, Senator Scott, for this time is actually 7,000. In 2020, the highest number of crossovers was unaffiliated to Republican and stayed. The second highest was Republican to Democrat and stayed. And the third highest was Democrat to Republican and stayed. So 2020 is an anomaly, and so it's a higher percentage of unaffiliated, but a lower gross number.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else? Thank you, Ms. Simmons. Ms. Herman?
Thank you, committee.
Pull it close. I'm so sorry.
I'm sorry, committee and chairman. Thank you for having me this morning. Marty Herman, League of Women Voters, and I'll just make a general reference to. I've been testifying testifying against this concept in front of Senator Scott in many iterations over the past 20 years, it seems like. So if any of this sounds familiar, it's because it is. First of all, the League of Women Voters, one of their slogans is be informed and vote. And be informed means learning about the candidates. We have candidate forums, we have questionnaires, we try to promote informed voters. This bill is don't bother to be informed because you vote before you have a chance to understand the candidates. It's a party discipline measure, which I understand the desire for it, but I would argue that that is not the function of statutes, is to enforce party discipline. But as I said repeatedly, I should be able to get up the day of the election, considering all the information that has been gathered and outed by whatever media up to that point, and make a decision the day of the final vote on election day, and force me to make up my mind based on supposition, who's going to file for office, maybe. It doesn't seem to make that be informed and vote work. I will say that people should be able to control their registrations, their voter registrations, which is the exercise of your franchise. It's such a personal and sacred responsibility, not just right, but a responsibility that I think you should be in control of how you exercise it, within the law, of course. But it's your registration, you should be able to control it, what maybe if not affiliated at all, or affiliate whenever that change makes it sense to you to exercise your franchise. I will just say you've heard a lot of reasoning today, as we have over the course of the previous 2 weeks of the session, by principle, practical reasons, but based on principle, well, this is a bad idea. And for that reason, I would urge you to defeat the bill, and I know there are versions out, there are iterations out of when the blackout period starts. There at the beginning of the filing, the beginning of absentee voting, 2 weeks out, and I would just argue that those are some better than others, but they're all not good. I would suggest that you leave the statute as it is. It's working. There's no harm being done. And just one other thing I will say, I've been watching the legislature for 42 years. Whatever letter is after your name, as a letter, as anyone else, there's a spectrum. So assuming that if you stick with a party, you're going to get a known quantity, that hasn't played out in my mind. And so, again, you've heard it before, in Wyoming, we vote for the person. We always have, and at certain parts in the electoral process, primary, certain things are set for the general election ballot that I think a voter should be able to be in on, seeing that the voter is deciding who his or her official should be. For those reasons, I would say also that the League of Women Voters on the state level has endorsed an idea that was just mentioned by Ms. Simmons of an open primary. We have a caucus to put people on the ballot and have a qualifying open primary. That would obviate this whole issue, and we would end up with maximum participation and people encouraging people to participate in their government. So be informed, be engaged, and vote would be carried through. That would be faithful to that slogan. I'll stand for questions if you have any, but I'm more than enough on the topic.
Any questions for Ms. Herman? Thank you very much. Anybody else in the room want to testify on this bill? How about online, Kelly? Anybody else in the room? All right, committee, you've heard the testimony. What is your pleasure? What is the pleasure on 163? Is there a motion? Got a motion by Boner. Discussion. Go ahead. You want to defend it? You might as well. You made the motion.
Thank you,
I'm glad
Mr.
you
Chairman.
did.
I think, Mr. Chairman, I'm in support of this bill. I've been a co-sponsor before. I think that it does alleviate some of the concerns we have regarding our elections. I always point out that, this doesn't end crossover voting, as it were. It ends, I guess, the crossover voting that happens, in the lead up to the election. So I think it's pointed out incorrectly that, often our elections are not so close that this would make a difference. But sometimes I think we could point to examples within the past 10, 15 years where it has made a difference in some rather consequential races. So for that reason, I support the concept. I have to admit, I hope that the sponsor would work with Brooks a little bit more closely to make sure that it achieves its effect. And I'm a little disappointed that apparently it hasn't. But I think that's something we could potentially fix as the bill moves forward. So that's why I moved it.
All right, thank you, Senator. Any other discussion? Any other amendments? Senator Scott?
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to vote no, and I'm going to explain why. I think a lot of my constituents will be offended by this bill. The group that will be the most offended are people who are unaffiliated, often recently moved here, and find they're locked out of the primary. And I think they're would be rightly offended, because that is most years, this last time, but most years, the largest source of the party change. But it wouldn't be restricted to that. Another reason is that while I think that the registration will still be allowed, given the language, I'm not sure it would be, because you've got three party statuses: Republican, Democrat, or unaffiliated. If you can't change them, if you can't declare one when you register after this thing, you might well find a court say that means you can't register. That's an interesting scenario that had not occurred to me, but I think it's possibly an unintended consequence. So for all those reasons, Mr. Chairman, I'm a no vote.
And thank you, Senator Scott. You know, I'm not sure you're correct, though, when you say that a party status, I don't think you declare unaffiliated. I think you just are. I think that no doubt made there. So you are undeclared, so to speak. Back to you, Senator Scott.
But Mr. Chairman, it's considered a party status, and changing from unaffiliated to affiliated with one of the parties, I think, is clearly
Declaration.
forbidden, and that will offend a lot of my voters.
Okay. Anybody else? Senator Barlow.
Mr. Chairman, so actually if we look on page 2, this is current statute, lines 13 through 16. It speaks to, I think, this exact point. May vote only nonpartisan, and if so, is not required party affiliation. And in the following line, however, it doesn't say however, but requesting a partisan primary election ballot constitutes a declaration of a party affiliation.
That's current language.
And that's current language. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so I guess I am perplexed about what that means to the unaffiliated voter in the context of the new language, which is on top of page 3. Would they be allowed to still change? Because by our own statute, it says that they are not party affiliated.
Right.
So, I mean, and Mr. Chairman, until this was brought up this morning, I hadn't actually keyed in on the nonpartisan thing, except for the good Senator Scott's comments previously. But so I'm not exactly sure if A equals B and B equals C and A equals C in this scenario. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Anybody else? Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And I know we need to move on this. I have really struggled with this issue since it came to the fore, and it continues to. A lot of rhetoric over the last 3 or 4 years and beyond. It was interesting during the campaign this year. I just completed another campaign. God knows why. But I was out in my district and never heard about this. No, my district really doesn't care about this. Very good friends, good neighbors who have chosen to go unaffiliated, have left the Republican Party very adamantly to say it just doesn't represent us anymore. The testimony we got this morning, which indicates that we may be closing them out of the process, really concerns me. I don't like that. Fundamentally, I have been against this all along simply because I don't believe we should be telling people how to vote. And I really struggle to get over that bar. this morning, I'm going to be willing to consider moving this along, but it's going to have to change a great deal for me to vote for the bill ultimately. So that's kind of where I'm at, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Anybody else? Senator Beitman, we did take some public testimony, and be fair to you, I'd certainly love you to have a last statement if you'd wish, or, you know. We kind of, we're stoking the engine here, you know, it's a long day for us.
It was a long day yesterday. It's been a long week, sir. Thank you, committee. Thank you for the opportunity to wrap this up. Again, we've been trying to kind of tighten up our primaries for a long time. However we get there, we'll get there. But I think there's a time frame where the change in affiliations needs to be halted to allow for the integrity of the process to play. Republicans, grassroots Republicans want their vote to count. They don't want it to be diluted. I understand unaffiliated, and I understand Democrats not really having a party anymore. The best thing, if this bill wouldn't be needed if we were a narrowly or equally divided state. But we're a supermajority state now. The Democrat Party is in tatters, and nobody wants to run as a Democrat anymore. And we probably wouldn't need this bill if that weren't the case. I get, but we're trying to make non-Republican voters happy by letting them vote in the Republican primary, but at the same time, you're taking that vote away from the actual Republicans. It's a conundrum, and that's why there's discord, quite frankly. So however you determine that to make that right, committee, that's up to you, but I just appreciate you hearing all of our testimony and working the bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Anything for the Senator? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hope you have a good day. Committee, back to you. Any proposed amendments? Call the roll, please.
Senator Barlow.
No.
Senator Warner.
Aye.
Senator Landon.
Aye.
Senator Scott.
No.
Mr. Chair.
Two ayes. Thank you, Senator. All testified. The next bill for our consideration is, we're still on Senate Joint Resolution 11. We closed public testimony on the other day, but it was so acrimonious, and I felt there was some personal attacks, and I wanted to give the sponsor and his co-presenter a chance to wrap it up, and then we'll work the bill. So Senator Larson, and I think maybe your fellows online, is that right? Okay, Kelly, we're looking for, what's his name? Mark Meckler. We're looking for him online. If you could let him in. So, Mr. Meckler, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, let's go through our sponsor of the bill, and he can yield to you as appropriate. We're kind of letting both of you wrap it up. So, Senator Larson.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Thank you for continuing this. I think I'm just going to turn it right over to Mark, if that'd be all right. I think we're attacking him pretty hard.
Yeah. So thank you, sir. And we really felt it was most fair to return back to you, and so you could kind of rebut some of the charges that were made. I realize that that Wyoming is sort of a stage or a national debate that's happening, and so it's pretty acrimonious. It's not our Wyoming legislative style. So please, sir, you could address the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, honorable members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to come back and address some of the things that were said in the hearing. And I want to start first by apologizing. I was, I believe, aimed at me, reprimanded for shaking my head during some of the other testimony. And I found it difficult to sit completely restrained. I've been in so many of these hearings, and I understand the protocol and I understand decorum, but the slanders that were being issued were so outrageous and so offensive that it was very difficult to sit still. Now, I want to start by quoting from who I think is the greatest modern American president, and that's Ronald Reagan. And I'm paraphrasing him when I say it's not that our opponents are ignorant, it's just that they know so much that isn't so. Several allegations were made during the course of testimony against the idea of calling an Article 5 Convention of States, against SJR 11, that literally rose to the level of slander. So I appreciate the opportunity to rise in defense. And first, to rise in defense of the United States Constitution itself, a document which we all adhere to and which we all revere. And that document was under attack because we heard repeated testimony that document was the result of a quote unquote runaway convention in 1787. And what was meant by that and what was said directly was that the men that were in convention in 1787, these great men, these icons of American history, George Washington, James Madison, and many others, that they actually defied the oaths they took, ignored what they were told to do by their state delegations, and illegally, and I want to restate that, illegally adopted the United States Constitution. That's an outrageous slander against the Constitution itself, to allege that our beloved Constitution, which has survived over 240 years, almost 250 years of history, the longest lived Constitution in the entire world, the average life of a Constitution being 17 years, was illegally adopted. That is a slander against the document itself, and it's one that I will vehemently defend against for the rest of my career in public life. Number two, it's a direct slander against the framers of the Constitution itself. These are men, again, that most of us revere, that we hold in high esteem, living in a time that was very different from our time in the sense that honor was held in the highest esteem. In fact, men would actually duel over the concept of honor. The idea that they would not act with integrity and honor was such an outrage that one could actually be challenged to a duel and killed over making such an allegation. That allegation was widely, broadly, and unequivocally made against the framers of the United States Constitution. And so I rise in their defense. And I do so not just as a matter of principle, but I do so factually. The record is very clear that the framers of the Constitution, meeting in 1787 there, had absolute authority to do exactly what. And again, this is a place where our opponents are simply ignorant of history. And I would argue 9.5 years into the process, they are ignorant by design and by intent. And I say that because anybody can read, and we have offered to anybody who's willing to read it, Professor Rob Nadelson's Law of Article 5, an actual treatise on this. We've offered to them Michael Ferris's Law Review article in the Harvard Review of Business and Law, which is almost a 100-page article refuting the idea that 1787 was a runaway convention. We've offered actual commissions of the delegates, the commissioners to that convention, which are available for public viewing, which all but two of them say that the commissioners had full authority to do anything and everything necessary to render the federal Constitution adequate for the exigencies of the Union. There is no limitation on their authority. We've offered to them Madison's Federalist 40, where he stated that if you want to know the authority of the commissioner,
you probably don't have to go into intense detail.
Okay.
We're so short of.
Okay.
My intent was to give you a last shot.
Okay. Perfect. Yep.
Not a last battle.
So then I would like to also defend the integrity of the grassroots activists in this organization, over 5 million of them, thousands of them there in your state, who are not trying to substitute some constitution that they say that we have already written. We don't know anything about that. We've never heard anything other than their allegations about some alternate constitution. I think the only place where they grab that from is there's somebody who serves on our legal advisory board by the name of Robbie George. He is a noted, in fact, considered one of the greatest conservative living constitutional scholars. He participated in an academic exercise several years ago where he and others were asked by the National Constitution Center to do an academic exercise, and he drafted something, frankly, I don't even know what it is. And I think that's what they're referring to. But I can say unequivocally, for millions of grassroots activists, for all the people who support us like Mark Levin and Ben Shiro, and many others that are notable national figures, that there is no alternate constitution that we have in our back pockets that we're pressing for. What we are trying to do is to use Article 5 of the Constitution to give you the power and the American people the power acting through you to proposed amendments to restore the United States Constitution. And I'm happy to stand.
Thank you very much, sir. Any questions for Mr. Meckler? Any questions? Thank you very much for making time and coming back. Thank you, Senator Larson. Anything you want to say?
Mr. Chairman, I just want to reiterate the federal Congress can do this every day. Why should states go and talk about proposing amendments to our Constitution? I think that's Wyoming should join the crowd. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Appreciate your work. Committee, you've heard the discussion. What would you like to do? Senator Barlow. Got a motion by Barlow. Discussion. Senator Scott.
Observe that most of the people that are for this, I think that this is a series of ills that will be cured the way they want it to be cured. And my observation is that I have strong suspicions that that won't happen, that the results will be rather different than some of the proponents think they will be. And Mr. Chairman, I'm frankly nervous about what some of those results might be. I think our Constitution has worked very well for us, very well for us. And the result is this freest, most prosperous, and best country in the world to live in. And I am very reluctant to challenging it. So I'm going to be a no vote.
Okay. Anybody else? Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. With great respect to the senator, I have really been hesitant on this front through the years. And it's really born out of this. I lay there at night, 2 o'clock in the morning, and I think about how does Wyoming win if we jump in the mix of this thing? Even with one vote, one state, there's so many states that just flat out don't agree with where Wyoming is, or don't understand us, don't land on the same side of things with Wyoming. I can't get my arms around how our state could come out of something like this in good shape. So many other things. This aims at the debt. 90% in graduate school. I took some courses on political economy. I've got a professor right here. The point is, we owe that money to ourselves for the most part. I worry about the unintended consequences, just like the senator to my left right here. I'm just really struggling to get there, Mr. Chairman. I'll probably be a no today.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Barlow, did you have anything else you want to say?
Mr. Chairman, so thank you, sponsor, and I've been a co-sponsor, I think, for my entirety of my tenure in the legislature. And it's principally because, Mr. Chairman, I traveled on my own accord 4 times to 4 different national conferences regarding the process of an Article 5, and not the issue, not whatever, the challenges, the budget or term limits, not that. I agree that we don't know what the outcome will be of a convention, but I find great comfort in the fact that it comes back to the states, to the people. It's the people, either through their elected body, depending on how that's set, or through or through themselves on the ballot, that get to ultimately make this decision. So in a committee yesterday, Labor Health Committee, we got to talk about our rights, the rights we have, exercising the rights. We've heard about some of those rights this morning in our first bill, an amendment, the suffrage. To me, Mr. Chairman, this is simply an avenue to exercise a right under Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution. And I cannot imagine that being limited. I cannot imagine voting for limiting that from any citizen of this country. So I am supportive of us having access to all of our opportunities under the Constitution. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Well, everybody, I was excited. I think the discussion itself and the process itself would be really healthy for our country. And last time I testified on this, I thought about when they ratified the original Constitution, there was a very learned discussion that took place around the country, and proponents and non-proponents made major treatises that were published in publications of the day. It was an incredibly important discussion, and it led to the ratification of the Constitution, which was amazing. But that didn't settle it. You know, the next year is clear into like 1820 with the Supreme Court actually finally weighing in and saying we have judicial review, and there was the case against the bank, something versus Maryland. I can't remember the case, but really established the Supreme Court to have judicial review and put the framework on. And then through all this time, we have been, perhaps some of us have been disappointed with the broad interpretation of the Constitution by the court and its legitimate practice. And we have no recourse against the court interpretations unless we change the Constitution. You can't do it with a law from Congress. So it's a balance thing over time. Like you, Senator Benz, you know, I think the whole would be healthy. The public debate would be healthy. I hope it wouldn't be as acrimonious as the skiing that's going around on these proposals across the country. But I think just a public debate, take a couple years to think about it, and then have it come back to the states, and you require 3/4 of the states to ratify any changes. Amazing check and balances. And this stuff, when somebody says they've rewritten a Second Amendment or something like that, I'm going like, that's a tinfoil hat statement, if you want my opinion. And I don't mean to impeach anyway, but that could never happen. So with that, I'm a supporter. Anybody else want to say anything? I will point out that we have a Senator Boner here, so you can call the roll.
Senator Barlow? Aye. Senator Boner?
You left a proxy aye.
Senator Landon? Senator Scott? No. Mr. Chairman?
Good luck. And thanks for all your hardworking people. You've worked hard on it. The next bill for our consideration is, I lost my place, Senate File 140.
And there we have it. By a vote of 3-2, the Wyoming Senate Committee on Corporations, Elections, and Political Subdivisions has just approved of our Convention of States resolution in Wyoming. That's SJ 11. So from here, we will move on to the full floor of the Wyoming Senate for consideration, and look forward to hopefully some favorable action there to move forward in Wyoming. This was a great, exciting day. You heard Mark Meckler defend not only Convention of States action, but also our Constitution and the Founding Fathers against some of the slanderous attacks against them that we heard in this committee testimony from members of the public on Tuesday that was pretty outrageous, and it's quite interesting to hear the chair of this committee refer to some of the opponents and their outlandish allegations and talk about them as tinfoil hat people. I would have to agree with him. Okay, producer G is informing me that we now have Senior Regional Director Dave Schneider with us for reaction. What's the mood like there in Wyoming? This is a pretty exciting day for the grassroots team there.
We can ask them directly. We've got Julie Baker here. So Julie.
There's a grassroots here.
Our state director, Julie Baker, is here, so we can give you on the spot reaction.
Yeah, we're thrilled, obviously, because we were a little bit, worried that one of the committee members might be wavering, and so he put in a proxy vote, said he'd vote for it. So we have to now whip the Senate, make sure that we have enough votes whenever the floor vote comes on.
Well, that was really exciting to see, Julie, and we all loved watching you and your team give testimony there on Tuesday. You did such a great job and demonstrate such commitment to this cause and sacrifice to travel there in the 2 feet of snow, freezing cold temperatures, super early in the morning. It inspires the rest of us to see your passion and your commitment to this, Julie, and you have been doing this for a long time. Congratulations on this victory today. And what's next in Wyoming?
Well, next is we hope that the floor vote, the committee of the whole, comes pretty rapidly because we're up against a deadline. So, we'll see. We have some leadership behind us, so
Yeah, there we are.
hopefully they'll. Oh, there's both of us here. Let's get closer.
So probably in the next 2 days. Today could be as quick as today, guys, believe it or not. So committee of the whole is what they're looking at. Hopefully tomorrow.
Yeah, hopefully tomorrow. Get some rest.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks again for being there. Thanks for talking to us. Congratulations, Julie.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Your hard work. And we will be watching the Wyoming Senate very carefully today and tomorrow to see what's happening. For people who are watching this from Wyoming, what can they do to help?
Contact their legislators, especially their senators right now. Pray. We've got the head of our prayer warrior team is here, and she's been sending out prayer requests across the state. And so those 2 things: contact senators, pray. Thank you.
Thanks, Julie.
I think that wraps it up pretty well.
All right. Thanks for being with us.
You bet. Thanks, guys.
So that wraps up our special edition of COS Live today, where we've just brought you live coverage of the Wyoming Senate Committee on Corporations, Elections, and Political Subdivisions. They've just voted by a vote of 3-2 to advance our Convention of States application, Wyoming SJ 11, onto the full Wyoming Senate. Stay tuned, and we'll be keeping you informed of what happens next. Thanks for watching.